aerodozz. This is another Tasigur game against Animar, and this guy's a pretty good deck, so let's see what ends up happening. He doesn't have a 1-drop, and I have a pretty good opening hand, especially with mental misstep, so I just go ahead and keep that. But it turns out that he does have a 1-drop, and it's possible that he may be mana screwed, so I just go ahead and counter it. And Animar usually doesn't have too many 1-drops anyway. And I see a pretty good upcoming set of cards that can deal with Animar, Jace, Venser, and a tutor. So I just choose not to pop my fetch land. And he drops Animar right here. And again, I choose not to pop any of my fetch lands just to draw Jace. He just attacks without dropping any creatures. Again, the Dividing Top. Now I want Jace out, so I just pass the turn for now. And if he starts ramping, then I can just use Venser and then just drop Jace on my next turn. And here he drops a Muldrifter, and with the high likelihood of Animar just comboing off, I don't want this spell to resolve just yet. So I just go ahead and Venser that. And he can't really attack since he does not have protection from blue. And here I top deck a land, which is lucky since I can use both Jace and Entomb. And using Jace, I just return Animar to his hand. Unfortunately, he's hitting his land drops pretty well, and he drops his own Jace. Now I do have removal for Jace, but that would also hit my Jace because it's a Maelstrom Pulse. So at this point I just opt to attack with Venser. And while I'm at it, I entomb my Life from the Loam. I use Life from the Loam strategy ability to get it back to my hand. And then I return some lands back to my hand again. I see that he has, just a regular creature on top, so I choose not to put it on the bottom using Jace's ability. And I see Thoughtseize as a scry with Sense's Dividing Top, so I just go ahead and use that and make sure that he doesn't have anything too crazy in his hand. Now I see Animar, which I just returned to hand, Duplicant Muldrifter, Peregrine Drake, and Primordial Sage. Now Muldrifter will draw him cards, so that's a pretty good card to have. Primordial Sage will ultimately, start making him combo off. So those are two pretty powerful cards. But Peregrine Drake, once he starts comboing off, then he can just untap 5 lands and then just drop a bunch more creatures. So I'm pretty afraid of that card. The correct play would probably be to get one of his draw cards into the graveyard, but as of now I'm pretty scared of Peregrine Drake, so I just make him drop that. Discard that. And since we have a full graveyard, I just play my commander and attack with Venser. He drops Animar. And then he chases my Sense's Dividing Top to the bottom. So I just go ahead and use Misty Rainforest to get a dual land. And here I top deck Kiora, which is amazing because then I can pretty much delay Animar forever. At least until he starts comboing off. So I just go ahead and do that. And here I top deck Forbid and Mystical Tutor. So I leave mana open for either of those. If he does combo off, I can just Mystical Tutor for a Boat Wipe. But if he chooses to hold back and just sort of plays one or two big spells, then I can just use Forbid. And this turn he basically just starts comboing off. He exiles my commander, but I don't really care since I'm just gonna tutor for wipe next turn. But right here he casts Mindclaw Shaman, and using that he could potentially just take away my Mystical Tutor. So seeing that, I just use it, and he still has access to my Maelstrom Pulse, which is pretty bad since he can take out my Kiora. But at this point, I guess I'm pretty happy with the wipe. But then he uses Maelstrom Pulse on Jace, so it takes out his own Jace, which I'm actually pretty happy with. Kiora is left alone, so she could be a potential long-term plan for ultimate. And using the extra mana from Phyrexian Tower, I just use Damnation. And I just go ahead and plus Kiora and drop Tasigur again, leaving mana open for Forbid. Of course, as predicted, he drops Animar again, and then make sure that does not happen. But then he drops Equilibrium, which is actually pretty bad, since he can just return whatever creatures my general, just back to my hand whenever he feels like it. So I draw Force of Will here, and since I don't have any blue cards, I just leave mana open for that. Here he plays a creature, and sort of worried that he'd play Animar again, I elect not to use Tasigur's ability, which turns out to be a mistake because he just passes the turn. But then I just go ahead and ultimate Kiora and drop Tasigur again. And maybe I should have exiled one more card because I didn't leave enough mana open for Force of Will again. He drops the Survival of the Fittest, and this is potentially really bad for me, so in order to stop him I have to Force of Will. So I just sack my general and use it, since I can just delve away any extra cost with the general. And he drops Animar again, but he doesn't have the extra mana to return the Kraken to my hand, so I use Life from the Loam's ability to get a few extra cards in my graveyard. And I see Toxic Deluge, so I want to exile all potential cards except for that. Attack with the Kraken, he blocks with his Owl. Now at this point is basically a game of time. I need to delay him enough until I can get an overwhelming advantage with the Krakens, and he has the ability to return them to my hand every time he casts a creature spell, so I have to stop him. Here I use Tasigur's ability. Hopefully I'll get Toxic Deluge back, but then I get Muddle the Mixture and Sword of Feast and Famine, and he opts to get Sword of Feast and Famine back to my hand instead of Muddle the Mixture, which is kind of, I guess it's understandable because I could just tutor for a Demonic Tutor or something, but then Sword of Feast and Famine basically allows me to bypass his Animar and he also gives me Toxic Deluge. And seeing as how I can just force him to discard, I go ahead and attack, and I kind of expected him to block with the Generator Servant here. But I guess he really needed that haste ability, and he just let it through, but then that might have been a mistake, because then he just concedes. So all in all, a pretty good game.